Good morning again, around 10:30, and for those of you who are with me at 10 o'clock, thanks for picking up with me again. The 10 o'clock time, of course, is really about catching everybody up with stuff that's happening here at the church, activities, plans, visions for the future, things like that. So thanks for joining me in that regard. This time is spent differently. This time is maybe even more selfish for me insofar as I get to talk about, I guess, whatever I feel like talking about. It's an opportunity for us to see what other folk are saying out there in our world, what our world is doing right now, and how does the church speak to that. And other different kind of educational ways. The problem with Facebook Live is I'm the only one that gets to talk. Unfortunately, it's always better if we can have conversation and we can be face to face, and that's what I miss most of all. But for now, this is what we get, and so I appreciate you bearing with me in this very one-sided kind of conversation. But nonetheless, there's no doubt that over the past week, our country has gone through a tremendous amount of stress, anxiety, conflict, violence. It's scary stuff. Many of you know my son lives in Washington, D.C. In fact, is about 4 blocks from the White House. That's where his apartment is because he studies at George Washington University, which is just right there. And whenever we go and visit him, which hasn't been an awful lot because of the pandemic, but whenever we do get a chance to go there, it's always been our kind of joy to walk down the Washington Mall, to visit all the monuments. We walk everywhere or take the subway. And that's just been a real kind of plus because often he's studying or in class, and we do most of our stuff in the evenings or just around meals when we can see him. So Valerie and I will often just do a lot of walking. But, that's all very different now with everything kind of shut down, restricted access. Every time I talk to my son Andrew, I'm telling him, be safe, don't go out of your apartment. You worry. And it's such an odd thing to say that about our nation's capital, where we have a tendency, I think we send 8th graders, right, from schools here in Southwest City Schools, and so many other city schools across the country make their annual trip to Washington, D.C. as an 8th grader to see all those great places and to see some history and what we as a country are so proud of. And then this past week has, in some ways, left a unfortunate stain on a lot of that. It's just something I don't want to get too awful political with. It's problematic for us, and as Christians, I think, we are called to speak to these things. As a pastor, I'm fully aware that we have people in our congregation that are all over the political spectrum. And I respect that for all of our people and for all of their different reasons, our different reasons to be of one ilk or another. And yet the gospel, as I try to say as consistently as possible from the pulpit, the politics of God, the politics of the gospel is very clear. And as Christians, it seems we should put that first and let the other things fall in place. So a lot of my prayers this week have been kind of facing the capital of the United States of America and the people involved with that, the people making decisions. And, I just ask you to join me in those prayers for our country and for this time of disruption and civil unrest and just lack of being in one accord together as a country. So I think one of the articles I want to talk about mentions that much more eloquently than I can. But anyway, today I have my Christian Century journal, and In one section, it's called Century Marks, and again, they collect a variety of different articles from a variety of different journals. They're snippets, right? They're little sections, so you don't get the whole context, you don't get the whole article, but they kind of piece and part things, and it gives us something to think about. Not everything I always agree with. I'm sure stuff you don't always agree with, but stuff for us to think about. And I think one of the things that makes our congregation interesting, that makes our congregation unique, is that we encourage critical thinking as Christians. I don't expect people to just, whatever I say is gospel or anything like that. We don't operate that way here at our church. We want to have the Bible inform us and teach us, and we want to talk about that, and we want to learn from that, and we want to grow in that. And so that's what makes being part of a church, I think, like ours, exciting, and glad to have you as part of that journey. So anyway, let's talk about some of these articles that that are in front of me right now. The first one is from USA Today. And it's from December 16th. It says, it's entitled Scientist's Duty. Özlem Türeci, a German scientist, was devoted to finding cures for cancer involving the immune system. When COVID-19 appeared on the scene, she saw it as her duty to shift her work to trying to develop a vaccine for it. The vaccine she helped develop, in cooperation with Pfizer, was the first to be made available and is highly safe and efficacious. Efficacious, big word for effective, I guess. Anyway, just speaking of that and the vaccine, it seems to me that as a church, we would want to say that we believe in vaccines as a church. I know there is sometimes debate about the effectiveness of vaccines or the viability of vaccines in a variety of ways, not just a COVID vaccine, but vaccines in general. Our church would want to combine with good scientists and good science and say vaccines are critical to public health. And our church would want to encourage all people to get the COVID-19 vaccination. I will be first in line when my group is called, if I can be. In other words, that's just a way of saying I support the vaccine, and I'm getting a vaccine when I can get one, when it's my turn in line, if you will. So I encourage all of our members to do the same thing. Science says it's safe. Science says it's effective. I think we should do that so we can get back to some kind of normalcy. Don't agree? We can have that debate offline sometime. I'd love to engage in that. And then the next little journal piece is from NPR, National Public Radio, from December 7th. It's called The Fauci Effect. It says this: the number of people applying to medical school is up 18% compared to last year. Applications at Stanford alone were up 50%. With 11,000 applicants vying for 90 openings. This spike is reportedly driven by the example of medical workers and public health figures like Anthony Fauci, who are working to address the pandemic. There was a similar, though less dramatic, spike in medical school applications after 9/11. Interesting. Desperate Existence. This is from a journal called The Guardian, and it's from December 17th. It says, years of confinement on Aegean Islands have led to a mental health crisis among refugees hoping to find their way to mainland Europe. So I should stop there for a second. I'm sure you're familiar with so many African refugees who are trying to leave northern Africa and for a better life in Europe somewhere. And to get to Europe, of course, they have to kind of cross the Mediterranean, Aegean, These are avenues for them to get up north and into some more opportunities for them that they don't have in Africa. Liken it a little bit to south of the U.S. border in terms of Mexico, Central America, and some South American countries, folk who are trying to have better opportunities and risking their lives for a better opportunity up north. Likewise in Europe, only the economically depressed area that is trying to find better way of life is Africa, and parts of Africa, not all parts of Africa, but then some parts of Africa. Then they leave from the northern part to get to Europe. Anyway, one in 3 refugees in that group have considered suicide, according to a study by psychological support experts. 3 out of 4 report sleeping problems, depression, anxiety, says the International Rescue Committee. The refugees' plight has been exacerbated by the coronavirus and the disastrous fire that decimated an overcrowded camp on the island of Lesbos in September. So it's pretty tough, and I'm sure many of you have seen some of those stories about refugees coming out of Africa and trying to get to Europe. Italy, Sicily, Greece, these are common places for these things to happen, unfortunately. Our next article comes from America, the magazine America, from December 14th. It's called Common Concerns. It says the election of Joe Biden, a Catholic, signals the possibility of better relations between the United States and the Vatican, according to Georgetown University's Drew Christensen, who's a Jesuit priest. The Pope and the President-elect share an interest in developing multilateral partnerships and giving priority to climate issues. Christensen argues that the new administration should follow the Pope's example by showing greater respect for China's civilization and recent economic accomplishment. Pope Francis has legitimated a Catholicism with a Chinese face, Christensen says. Oh, that's kind of an article that's beyond my pay grade. True, Joe Biden is Roman Catholic, practicing Roman Catholic, and we'll see what that means in terms of the United States' relations with the Vatican. We always hope for positive relations with the Vatican. That's a good thing. Know that the ELCA, the Lutheran denomination that we are a part of, has good relationships with the Vatican and with the Pope. Our bishop has met with the Pope. We have ecumenical talks and negotiations with them a lot. We're kind of, we're not even distant cousins. We're more like alienated brothers and sisters who really want to be family but just find it really hard to do. We'll get there, I hope, at some point, that's for sure. The next article comes from Church Times from November 27th. It's entitled Jesus Home. I think this is interesting because I like archaeology a little bit. Ken Dark, a British archaeologist, thinks he's identified Jesus' childhood home. Carved out of stone, the home lies beneath a 5th century convent in Nazareth. Such claims for the location were previously made in the 1880s and then rejected in the 1930s. After 14 years of study, Dark believes the construction demonstrates the kind of expertise that Joseph would have had as a tekton, it's a Greek word, tekton, which can mean either carpenter or stonemason. So I haven't seen much about that in other journals that I have. I'll have to look for that. I haven't heard much about this new discovery, so we'll see. I think it's always interesting, though, whenever we can get some good archaeology to help us and quite frankly, help those who are struggling in their faith about the historical realities of Jesus, to know how much historical facts we have about Jesus, that time period in history, and not just Jesus, but those other figures in the Bible that we hear about that Jesus was associated with, the Herods of the world, that time period in that part of the world. There's really a great deal of archaeology going on right now. I used to subscribe to a magazine called Archaeology Review, and would have different digs and things like that all the time. Interesting stuff. I don't have really the time for a lot of that anymore, but it is interesting whenever that stuff crosses my desk. The next one is from a magazine called The Conversation. This is entitled The Reverend Senator. Now, we know what happened in the Georgia Senate races. When this was written, obviously, they did not know what would take place. So keep that in mind as I read this article. It says, if Democrat Raphael Warnock, senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, were to win a Georgia runoff election for the U.S. Senate, he would become the second ordained minister currently in the Senate, joining Republican James Lankford of Oklahoma. Talk about two different people. About 2% of current U.S. House members are ordained ministers. About half of current senators had prior careers in law. Law is the most common former profession of congressional Democrats. Business is the most common among Republicans. I don't know what any of that really means. Just some data for you to chew on. The next article is from RNS. And I'm not sure what that stands for. RNS. Somebody can look that up and let me know later. But it's entitled In Black and White. It says, the president of the National African American Fellowship of the Southern Baptist Convention. It's a long title for a denomination name. National African American Fellowship of the Southern Baptist Convention has asked for a meeting with 6 seminary presidents, all of them white, who recently declared that critical race theory is incompatible with the denomination's faith statement. The academic theory, which focuses on structural racism in institutions, has been a topic of heated debate in Southern Baptist circles, especially after a resolution was passed about it at the SBC, which is the Southern Baptist Convention, 2019 denominational meeting. So, that's a whole probably Sunday school class to talk about critical race theory and what that means in terms of systematic racism, etc. So we don't have the time to talk about that. It's a good issue to talk about. It's just complex. That sounds like that's an internal Baptist issue, which we have our own issues probably with our Baptist brothers and sisters theologically, but we'll let them figure that out on their own turf in their own time. This next one comes from History News Network. It's entitled Reckoning. John Hopkins, founder of the Baltimore University, which bears his name. Many of you have heard, right? John Hopkins University. John Hopkins has long been revered as a Quaker and an abolitionist. Turns out, the Maryland entrepreneur got his wealth from real estate, railroads, and banking and owning slaves. The 1850 census makes clear that he claimed 4 men as part of his property. Martha S. Jones, historian at Johns Hopkins and director of the Hard Histories at Hopkins Project, says she has not been able to wear her Johns Hopkins sweatshirt for Zoom classes since making this discovery. So, I'm not sure what to say about all of that, except that seems to be part and parcel of this reckoning that's going on about our history, right? About how so many things that we've always just kind of talked about and assumed didn't have any baggage to them, have baggage to them. So it's one of the reasons why there's all this discussion about renaming certain military bases because of ties of these people to the Confederacy and slave owning. And likewise now, it seems with this John Hopkins guy from Johns Hopkins University, and what kind of formal relationship does the university now want to have with someone who owned people as property and things like that. So that's kind of that reckoning that goes on individually with every single human being. We call that sin a little bit, and then also what that means when it comes to communities that this is a part of. I have no good answer for that, except that it continues to be something that troubles us, and something that I think we're called to continue to look at and pray about and work on, right? So that we can try to achieve the most just society possible. The next snippet of news comes from a publication called Literary Hub. It is from December 7th. Blended Religions. Musician Tina Turner grew up Baptist, but now practices Buddhism, chanting morning and evening prayers. She says she never fully left her Baptist background and still respects it. She doesn't consider a Baptist desire to go to heaven in conflict with Buddhist aim to find a state of bliss in this life. Quote, both paths focus on developing oneself positively and experiencing eternal happiness, unquote, said Turner, who has just published a book entitled Happiness Becomes You. Buddhism has taught her that while she can't change her circumstances, she can change how she responds to them. So that's that. The next comes from Bloomberg News. It's from December 15th. Trickleup Effect, it is called. So all you economists out there will appreciate this little snippet. 50 years of tax cuts for the rich have not trickled down to the rest of the people, according to a study done by 2 London scholars. The study of the UK, the United States, and 16 other countries found that tax cuts only add to the wealth of the upper class. Defined rhetoric from economic conservatives over the time frame of the study. The authors conclude that tax increases don't harm the economy, and that wealthier people should be asked to carry more of the burden of the pandemic. You politicians and economists can debate that if you'd like. It sounds very, by the way, very Republican, very Democrat too, doesn't it? Marked out. This is from. This is another comment. Don't worry about it. There's 2 quotes in here. I want to give you. That's how we'll close today because we're almost at a half an hour. So, the first comes from Robin Givhan, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning critic who writes about politics, race, and the arts. And she's writing on Joe Biden's visible yet quiet Christian faith. This is what she writes, quote, politics has overheated religion. At a time when Scripture should be at its most profound and when its grace should shine, religion is scalding. At a time of grave sickness and fear, religion should be a balm for believers and non-believers too. But instead, it's just another political hand grenade, unquote. So that's an indictment on me. Let's be clear about that. Insofar as a pastor in the church, one of many pastors in many churches, politics and religion, while clearly should be separate, religion does have something to say about how society goes, right? So does politics. And so sometimes this odd little dance we play a lot. And it's very interesting. And I know that on occasion, like this past week, I spoke up in regards to what happened at the Capitol. I spoke up about how the church responds to such activities. Much like how the church would respond to any tragic event. 9/11, or anything else that's tragic in... At some point, I probably should talk about all the killings that are going on in Columbus, Ohio right now, right? It's tragic. These kinds of things the gospel does speak to, and as Christians, we need to address. We'd be less than faithful if we didn't. Jesus certainly addressed the things that were going on in his time and in his place. We ought to as well. How we do that, of course, is what is critical and takes a certain amount of finesse and care, right? So anyway, that's from Robin Given. The next quote, and we'll end on this, is from Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of Great Britain. He died in November, but this is what he says, quote, "We've moved in Britain and America from being a we society, we're all in this together, to an I society, I'm free to do whatever I choose. The bad news is that this leaves people vulnerable and alone. The good news is that we can turn it around and become a we society again." Unquote. I think that's profound in many ways, and I think it's true. I can't speak to the UK, obviously, but I think we can speak to the United States insofar as we've heard a lot of language, especially during the pandemic, is you can't take my freedom away. I can do this. I have the right. I, instead of what's best for our country. We are in this together, that kind of stuff. There's a huge shift in that. I'm not sure what drives all that. I have opinions, I guess, about it. But I think that's a slippery slope to get on, and that the church is called to remind us of the power of we, that we're in this together, that we can achieve much more than just one person can achieve. We try to stress this in community events. We feed a lot of people because we're we, not because I. When we get together to worship, we worship as a group, as a we, not just one person. And so these are things that we strive for. It's one of the reasons why it's hard to be the church right now, because we don't get a chance to be we week in and week out, right? As a church community, worshiping together. That has kind of cut the legs out from under the church. And so we're doing the best we can, trying to be we virtually. Extremely difficult. And so, continue to pray for us as we navigate these new waters. They're not new anymore, but continue to navigate these odd waters. And try to recapture we as often as possible. So, all that being said, thanks for your patience and listening to a variety of different things. It's different, and I hope that you can gain and glean something from all of this. So, as always, I look forward to seeing you. I'm so happy to be in partnership with you. I'm glad you're part of our church, friend of our church. And as always, if you have any questions at all, never hesitate to call the church office. Talk to myself, talk to Pastor Wise, email us, text us, do something, make connections. That's what this is about. And I'll look forward to talking with you soon, certainly Sunday, and then again next Wednesday. In the meantime, God bless you. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye now.